Eric the Turf Teacher Jones.
Oh, yeah!
Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.
Welcome, everyone. This course is entitled Natural Pest Controls, or Natural Pest Controls in the Landscape, whichever you want to call it. The North Carolina Department of Agriculture entitles it Natural Pest Controls. And basically what it is that we're going to talk about is all the cool things that Mother Nature puts in place that we really need to, use or have in our back pocket when it comes to controlling some of these pests. We as humans, we tend to mess up the natural cycle of pest control, and with development and with the plants that we bring in, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what really disturbs this balance in our ecosystem. And we need to think about ways that we can incorporate these natural pest controls back into, especially when we start considering integrated pest management, which is a term that, my customers definitely are curious to learn about and willing to pay for, because so many people are getting distracted or disturbed, as you want to call it, not wanting to apply pesticides on their properties. I mean, we have clients that say absolutely no Roundup, and that is a choice that they have. They're just not going to have a weed-free yard or shrub beds and tree rings and things of that nature. They just have to pay a lot more for it. I loved one of the classes that I took at the Green and Grow Show last year, was entitled Organic Lawn Care. And the big question is, does truly organic lawn care exist? And the answer is yes. But your customers may not be as happy with the program due to the cost, one, and then due to the results that you get. It's not going to be as effective, and it is going to cost more to do organic lawn care. So that is our topic of tonight, natural pest controls. And so we will go ahead and get started. And so our objectives, we as landscape contractors, we will identify what are the natural pest controls. We will identify what are pests. And, not every pest is a pest in every situation. Sometimes they may be a welcomed guest. And we have some slides that we will discuss with that. I remember very well when my three little girls were little. They'll always be my little girls, but wanted to have, a pet hamster who looked just like a mouse. And they loved this little creature, loved him to death. But you know what? If they were to get up during the middle of the night and see one of its brothers or sisters, which is a house mouse, run across the floor, they would have freaked out. So, there you have very similar species that is a welcomed guest and a pest most of the time. We will also identify how these natural pest controls work, and then we will identify ways that we can use these natural pest controls in the landscape. So in this lesson, we're going to look at the balance of nature and some of the fundamental ways in which living organisms control their own population and the populations of other living organisms. And so what is the difference between a human designed and a natural system? Human designed systems are generally simplified in the number and arrangement of species they support compared to the complexity of undisturbed natural environments. Recognition of these complex interactions within the communities of organisms. So basically, we're saying that some of the human design systems are very simple in the numbers, but can also lead to some bad situations because they may not have the natural enemies of the pest that we are wanting to target. And so it's all about having this complex community or ecosystem where we can incorporate these natural pest controls. And so obviously, when we look at all living organisms, we are including the subset of organisms that we regard as pests. So what are the pests? Well, pests are simply any living organism that is not welcomed in a certain situation. And I love throwing this example out here because I'm a big sports fan. Love baseball, love football. I love, pretty much any sport that's played on turf grass. And so, let's take golf, for instance. There's a lot of golf courses, especially in my area, that is Bermuda, right? We would want to play golf on Bermuda grass. Well, I'm also in a region where most of our customers are cool season turf grass clients. We're here in the central Piedmont of North Carolina. So we're in that transition zone, but most of our clients do have cool season grasses. Well, when I go to the golf course, I want to play on Bermuda grass. When I go home, I want to, walk through my fescue lawn. I love it on the golf course, but guess what? I do not like it when that Bermuda grass starts encroaching from the neighbor's yard or has been brought in from the lawnmowers. There's sprigs on it. There's just ways that Bermuda grass can creep up into my fescue. So the actual Bermuda grass becomes a pest at that situation, but I absolutely love it when playing a round of golf. And so, what is natural pest control? We know what pest control is. I mean that we are using all kinds of things to control these pests, whether it's a pesticide, whether it's traps, whether it's removing the food source. That is pest control. But natural pest control is pest control that occurs in nature without any prompting from humans. Nothing. It's nothing to do with us. It is Mother Nature taking care of it. And can anybody tell me what Mother Nature's number one pest control is that's out there that most people are spooked, scared to death of? Now that it's close to Halloween, you'll start seeing a lot of these little creatures as statues, as actually Halloween promptus and decorations. The spider. The spider does more for us as landscapers and horticulturalists than we can imagine. But people want to squish them. People are scared of them. They do not like them. And to be honest with you, there's only 4 or 5, I think, poisonous spiders in the United States. Here in North Carolina, we have 2 of them. The black widow and the brown recluse. And yes, those we would want to get rid of. But the other spiders, they are doing us a huge, huge favor. So leave them be. And so, as humans, we have disturbed this great system, and we must now learn how to reestablish the effects. So, it's been messed up. The ecosystems have been destroyed. We need to figure out how we can bring all of this stuff back into the landscape. And understanding the natural principles will help you tremendously in managing your pest problems. And furthermore, these concepts are critical to the development of a successful IPM program or integrated pest management. And my customers love hearing about this. We got a lot of clients have young kids. They don't want the spray in. They don't want it. We're not going to pull weeds, but there are some other measures that we can take in place, or they're just going to have a high tolerance of weeds. And that all goes back to the client. You've got to sit down and really figure out what it is that bothers them. We've got clients that would fire us for one dandelion in the yard. They want the perfect lawn, and they understand that it's going to take chemicals and cultural practices to make all that happen. And so they have a very low tolerance for weeds. Then we have customers that say, hey, sir, you got some clover in the yard. Do you want us to spray for it? Absolutely not, Eric. I'm happy with it. It stays green all summer, blooms once a week. I'm happy to keep my clover. So they have a very high tolerance of weeds and actually do not care. So there's both of those clients, and both of them can actually make you money. You just got to figure out and work with them and see what their tolerance levels are. And so here, crabgrass, Digitaria species, can produce 2,000 seeds per square foot in a single season. So that is a lot of seeds. And so when we're starting to think of, what are some ways we can prevent that from, spreading from yard to yard, guys, it's as simple as cleaning off the mowers from yard to yard, just taking the backpack blower and blowing that off. Blowing your pants legs off after weed eating. You get those crabgrass seeds on you, and then you take it to a yard that's completely crabgrass free, but your guys are bringing it to the next yard. That is just a cultural practice to take that needs to be implemented and reinforced with your guys. Hey, clean the machines, clean yourself off before moving property to property, because that can actually be spread very, very quickly. 2,000 seeds per square foot. Good old example of it. Here, you see the common housefly. They can lay 600 eggs, which mature in about 6 days in hot weather. And so, what do we think about that? You have a pair of original flies that can produce 600 eggs that are going to hatch in 6 days. Think about what about on day 7 when these 600 flies become parents themselves as well? That can get very, very crazy. And given that reproductive rate, a pair of these original flies could eventually lead to a layer of flies thousands of feet thick around the entire planet in just one summer. But why has that not happened? Why do you think flies have not taken over? It's not because of mom's fly swatter. That's not what's killing them. It's because of natural controls. And so we might ask ourselves, what are some of these natural pest controls? The most important ones are climate and weather, food and habitat, pathogens, predators, and parasites and parasitoids. So all of these can be incorporated into an integrated pest management plan. And we're going to look at each one of these in detail, each one of these natural controls. So what is the difference between climate and weather? Well, climate is the long-term overview of temperature and humidity changes in a region. Weather is our local and short-term variation in climate. So we may have we may have a harsh winter one year, or we may have a mild winter. It just really depends. And almost, I would consider some of our microclimates that we have on our properties, which can invite pests in. The first key to combating these pests is to have good, healthy plant material. And a lot of the times we're incorrectly pruning. We're planting a plant that needs full sun, planting it in full shade. So you're weakening that plant, which again is just inviting those pests in, whether it's an insect, and definitely on the disease management side, these weaker plants are going to get an infestation. And so back to the weather. What if we had some cooler winters, or we had some warmer winters? All of that's going to play into this, especially with the tomato hornworm. And so I want to investigate that a little bit more. When warm weather usually favors the hornworm, wet or dry will determine if the hornworm breaks out early or late, and to the extent how large the outbreak is. So warmer weather, we have a milder winter. And is it wet or dry? If we have a warm, dry winter, we should have a larger infestation of the tomato hornworm. And I was at a local pet store not long ago, and they actually were selling these guys 3 for $15. And I was like, man, $5 a piece. I mean, what it was is these are like one of the favorite treats of some of these lizards that people are having as pets. And so they were actually, producing these hornworms to actually feed the lizards. And so, you know what? A lot of people would not want to have tomato worms on their tomato plants, but if you're getting like $15 for 3 of them, not a bad way to make a little going out to eat money. So food and habitat. If there's no food, there's no organisms. Pests must have something to eat. The simplest non-toxic method of control can be limiting the pest's access to food. You'll see people put the pet dish in a floating moat of soapy water. That's going to keep roaches out. People will put nuts and grains in rubber sealed jars. Clothes malls, they'll place clothes in a bag, vacuum the cracks and crevices to keep the moths out. So it's there, you know, keep the food away. Habitat. A lot of people don't realize it doesn't matter, you know, what the income level is. There's going to be cockroaches in every single house. I don't care if they're brand new or whatever. You're just going to see them. The problem is when you see one run across the floor, that means you've got too many hanging out in the house because they don't want to be out on that tile floor. They like where it's dark. They like where they can get, you know, moisture. That's why they like, you know, being around water pipes that can sweat. They've got access to water there, and they don't want to be out in the middle of the tile floor. So if you see one there, that means they've been kind of kicked out and there's too many of them hanging out with those walls. An example, ash aphid on Modesto ash trees. They prefer growth at the bottom and within the canopy. And so we got a little picture here. Same thing happens with these ash trees. People like cutting them back, you know, like we do our crepe myrtles. And we see that, you know, we see that problem all the time with crepe myrtles. We prune the crepe myrtles back, just like with the ash aphids or with the ash trees. We prune them back. We're going to get that flush of sucker growth, and that is going to invite the aphids in. They need that new herbaceous plant material full of nitrogen to actually survive. So we see the crepe myrtles that's got the black sooty mold on it. That's from aphid infestation, and you'll see it on the ones that have been cut way back, or what people term crepe murder. Let Mother Nature do its thing. Just let the plant be natural. Don't cut it back. Don't tree top it. But I know people love that look. I personally don't. I love the looks, the natural look of a crepe myrtle. But people just top these trees back. And people say, well, why is it done in the first place? Well, pollarding, which is the actual terminology for it, you know, when you pollard a tree, our ancestors pollarded trees back in the day for actually a survival skill. They would plant trees right up against their house that was made out of homemade brick. And so when they pollarded the trees back in the wintertime, it allowed that sunlight to heat the house, warm up those handmade bricks. They also took the wood, that flush of growth that they had cut back, they used it as kindling to help get fire started. And then the spring, they would get that new flush of growth, which was a lot thicker and denser, and it actually helped cool the house. So they pollarded trees to help with the heating and cooling of the house. And so back to the aphids. They have two population peaks each season. And this usually typically corresponds when nitrogen levels are at the highest in the foliage. And that's going to be at spring leaf unfold, and it's going to be at fall leaf drop. So what we don't want to do is create more of a problem with these nitrogen applications. And so what are we doing in the spring? We're fertilizing our turf grass. What are we doing in the fall? We're plugging and seeding, especially here in the Piedmont. We're plugging and seeding, and we're putting out that nitrogen as starter seed fertilize. And so we're increasing the nitrogen that is available for the aphids. We don't want to do that. And so I wanted to throw this quote in here. It says, one can properly think of most human lives as caught in a precarious equilibrium between the microparasitism of disease organisms and the macroparasitism of large body predators, chief among which have been other human beings. And this is a quote from William McNeill's Plagues in People. And so look at what a disease can actually do. I mean, we almost had a disease wipe us out a few years ago. Look at what the plague did, you know, centuries ago. It is just horrible. And the one thing that can wipe out, you know, humankind is a disease. And so with pathogens, what we're going to see, or when we see it happen, is usually when there's an overpopulation, which will lead to resource depletion, which then leads to malnutrition, and then competition for habitat. And so when I was a youngster, I remember having to go turkey hunting quite a ways away from here in the central Piedmont. We would travel up into closer to Boone and the mountains to do turkey hunting. My dad would tell me stories of son. He said the only thing we could hunt back in the days was rabbit and squirrels. He said there was no deer, there was no turkey. Well, as I got a little older, the deers had moved in, and so you could kind of deer hunt around here, but you still couldn't turkey hunt. Now I can sit out on the back deck and pretty much any given night see a turkey or see a deer. And what that is they have become overpopulated. They have moved out of the wilderness areas. They're having to move into to our homes because we keep taking their natural habitats. It's just really a bad thing. And there is that competition for habitat. And so if this was to happen with humans, it's always going to lead to disease and war. And we're actually seeing even some of the deer population where they are getting sick just because of that overpopulation. And so plants and animals have been doing this long before humans. They can control themselves. They can actually control their populations. It's almost like when you see a mother dog have a litter of puppies, if they're going to pick out the weakest one. If they recognize that one's not going to make it, she won't feed it. What it is, she's not going to take the resources from the other puppies that are going to make it. It's all about getting that next generation to the next level so that they can reproduce. With predators, critical in the suppression of natural populations of animals and plants. And together with pathogens and protozoids, make up the wonderful world of biological control. And yes, there are companies that do produce aphids not aphids, but ladybugs, parasitic wasp that you can release into greenhouses. It's not really going to help us into the landscape because these creatures would actually just, fly off. But when you have a controlled environment, they work really well. You actually have the parasitic wasp that will kill the aphids. Ladybugs will kill the aphids. But these parasitic wasps are so cool. They'll actually drill a hole into the side of the aphid. And if we're to look at an aphid under a microscope and you see a little black dot, that means that it has been, had the parasitic wasp eggs laid inside of it. Here you have the wasp eggs inside the aphid. And when they hatch, they have a natural food source. They eat the aphid from the inside out. It's a horrible way to die, but it is very, cost effective for greenhouses and a lot safer. We're not having to use a pesticide. We're using a natural pest control. And so with predators, they can be mammals, arthropods, or they can be microorganisms or a fungus. They are the free living general feeders. And even with turf grass, we are, applying a fungus to turf grass seed that is actually going to help with, killing the insects that affect it. So we're pretty smart. We're pretty smart when it comes to this stuff. The chemists and the biologists are figuring this stuff out, and they are implementing these natural controls and making it a lot easier for us to control the pests. With these predators, they can eat a single prey at a meal, or they may consume many individuals as the convergent lady beetle does. Lady beetle will eat a bunch. And every now and then you might see a big gathering inside your house. It's just what they're going to do. Natural pest control for that is the vacuum. But predatory insects in the larval stage must consume several prey to attain maturity. So predator adults lay their eggs near populations of prey where the hatching young have a chance of obtaining food. Spiders are the exception to this rule. And what do they do? Well, they are going to, of course, do their webbing, and they're going to let the actual, their food come to them. They're going to put their webbing near light. That's why you can always go outside, and on an outdoor floodlight, you're going to see a spider that's going to have a web there because the other insects are attracted to that light. They're going to fly into the nest. They're going to lay their eggs there so that their babies have that readily available food. Parasites and parasitoids, what is the difference? And what is more effective? Well, parasitoids are going to kill the host. Parasites are going to just knock it for a loop. They're not going to kill the actual host. An example of a parasite is the pinworm. Parasites can regulate the pest population, but they can debilitate it. Cannot regulate it. So we would want to use a parasitoid, which is going to kill it. And parasites is a nasty thing. There's parasites inside the human body, and there's ways to extract that out. It's just a natural phenomenon that we have them in our own bodies. Parasitoids are the unsung heroes of naturally occurring insect control. They're too small to notice. They have no common names, and their scientific names are way too long and even difficult to say. So people just don't know what they are. But like I said, there are biological companies that produce them, greenhouses, people with greenhouse tomatoes and growing any type of crop in a greenhouse will have access to purchase them. Parasitoids are members of, the same family as bees and wasps. They are host specific and they are restricted in the number of species that they can attack. And here, I talked about what these parasitic wasps can actually do to the aphid. And this is a picture perfect situation of it. You have the aphid, you have the wasp that will drill a little hole or puncture the side of the aphid. They will inject the aphid with their eggs, and it's not going to kill it right away. But these eggs are going to mature. They're going to hatch. And once these wasps hatch, they're going to eat the aphid from the inside out. And then this little black circle here that you would see underneath a microscope is where the actual wasp have removed themselves from the aphid after they have killed it. And so, how do natural controls work? They work all the time. And so then why do some pest populations grow so large that they can become a problem? And so here we have two examples. We have house plants being set outside. And think about this. You bring your house plants inside during the winter. They're inside the house. It's not their natural environment. The plants get weak. Again, a healthy plant is the best defense against any pest. But when you bring these plants inside, they go through the winter months. They're not getting natural sunlight. They're not being exposed to the natural environment outside as when we set them out on the back deck or patio. And so they are going to develop disease. They are going to develop insect infestations. But as soon as we set them outside on that first spring day that we know that they're not going to get destroyed by cold weather, these plants automatically start, prepping themselves up. They start looking a lot better. And all it takes is 1 or 2 days outside in the natural environment so that these natural pests can come and take care of the pests that were killing them inside. Now, here's a situation with some California oak trees that happened several years ago, and it took 2 agricultural agents to really jump in and figure this out. These oak trees were infested with the California oak moth. And unfortunately, these moths would come in and defoliate every single tree. I mean, basically do it overnight. Well, residents of California were getting very upset. And so the first thing that they wanted to do was either cut down the trees or use a pesticide. And that's hard to believe that in the state of California, people wanted to use a pesticide because that's one of the stricter states when it comes to applying pesticides. But these 2 ag agents started looking into this oak moth that was defoliating the trees. Well, the moths only came around during the dry season. And so when they defoliated the oak trees, it did not allow the trees to lose water through through the evaporation. So the trees were actually able to retain the moisture that they had inside of them. It didn't leave the tree. So the defoliation was not that bad. So what do you think also happens when the moths are eating? Well, they're using the bathroom. I mean, these guys will eat and go straight to the bathroom. So they are using their droppings and they're falling at the base of the tree. And so when the rains returned, these oak trees had a natural fertilize, and the trees the following year were the healthiest that they'd ever been. But the California residents wanted to, one, spray a pesticide or go ahead and cut down the trees. But thankfully, these agriculture agents jumped in, studied it, and figured it out and said, hey, guys, this is Mother Nature taking care of her oak trees. And so we need to learn more about these fluctuations that are a part of a natural cycle of events in their ecosystems. We have to adjust our aesthetic opinions and reactions accordingly. And of course, people get freaked out. They see a spider web. First thing they want to do is kill the spider. You know, you see a black snake in the yard. First thing you want to do is kill that snake, knowing that that black snake is going to, one, keep rats out of the house, and it's going to keep, the poisonous snakes away. So you've got to learn. The first thing you got to do is learn about these pests that we sometimes are just a little bit afraid of. If you studied their life cycle and studied their biology, you're going to realize, hey, they're doing the environment. Everything was put here for a reason. And so the spiders and the snakes, guys, they help out so much more than people realize. Most of our serious pest problems arise through accidental and occasionally deliberate but misguided introduction of exotic species. And here we have a list of them. The indoor cockroach is not native to North America. It was brought over on the boats coming over when they discovered America. The gypsy moth, the Japanese beetle, Mediterranean fruit fly, Dutch elm disease, which took, all of our elm trees away. It was a nasty disease, but a lot of arborists and landscape contractors got plenty of work when the elm disease happened. They were taking down these trees and planting them. My dad redid the entire Wake Forest University where they had all the elm trees planted in the quad. Took them down, planted new ones in, and it's, a beautiful place now. Chestnut blight, even dandelions. You got to keep the kids out of the yard when you have dandelions because they're going to pick those little white things and blow them all over the place. And then kudzu brought over to help with erosion on the railroad tracks. And so when we breed plants to satisfy human desires, we sometimes destroy the traits that discourage insects. Hybrid roses probably being one of the most common situations here. Grandma's roses didn't really have that many problems, but the new roses that we are planting in people's places are just susceptible to disease and insects. And so we must thoroughly investigate how we can maintain the natural controls when altering plants or combining plant materials from different environments. And this is something that really, really needs to be taken into consideration. I see it so many times where a designer doesn't know their plant materials. And this happens not, because that person is competent. It's just because of where they're located. I see plans that are designed by architects from Colorado for a property here in North Carolina. It's just not going to work, guys. They're putting more of the dry climate plants, or they're putting plants that doesn't need so much water in with plants that like wet feet. They're also putting plants together in different soil environments. They're putting plants together that require different lighting requirements. Some plants have to have so many hours of daylight just to maintain their bloom periods. Right now, we see a lot of mums being planted and put out in people's properties. And you see it a lot in commercial environments where they have landscape lighting or they have street lighting. And the contractors will plant mums, and then 3 days later, the mums have bloomed out. And then the customer's like, "Hey, what happened to the mums? They're not blooming anymore. They've lost their color." Well, it's because mums need 8 hours of darkness to keep the blooms going. All of that light is going to bloom them out, and it's done. So know the light requirements, know the soil requirements, know the fertility requirements. Again, it goes back to that microclimate of where these plants are being planted. And so many designers are putting these plants, just mixing them up. They can draw the pretty picture, but they don't know the science behind that plant. And a lot of that can prevent all of this from ever happening. Again, a healthy plant is the number one way we can keep the pests out.
Eric the Turf Teacher Jones.
Oh, yeah.
Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.